Reach FM.
Jesus in disguise.
It's Brendan Heath, and he's hanging with us this morning. Hello.
Hey, Rhonda.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you this morning?
I'm doing good. So a lot of great things on the horizon for you. You are in the middle of your Blue Mountain tour with Matt Maher, and super excited to see you in concert coming up this weekend in Sebastian. But want to get to finding out a little bit more about you and how you got into this thing called singing and touring. So when you first started out, how did you know that you could sing? Like you talked about in that song, I'm Not Who I Was, but also that God was calling you to the ministry of music. That can be a pretty tough road to travel.
Yeah, well, I think music in general can be a hard road to travel, but for me, I learned how to play guitar when I was 13. I got a guitar for Christmas, and I got to be honest, my motivation was a girl, and as most times it is with a guy. She played guitar, and I wanted to learn how to play, and write her a song. And about the same time, well, maybe like a year or two later, I went into this organization called Young Life. They told me the gospel for me for the first time. And so when I accepted Jesus, it just became a part of what I wrote about. It was like a no-brainer, easy thing for me to do because I was falling in love with God and with Jesus. And my decision to play Christian music was for a few reasons. Number one, I'm from Nashville, and I had several friends in the music business, and they wanted to help me, and I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and it sounds like so anticlimactic, but it's true. It was just this opportunity that came up. It wasn't like a huge dream of mine. I wanted to be a country songwriter, so hopefully someday that dream will come true. But
country music is like, I love the lyrics to a lot of those songs. I'm not a huge country music fan, but every time I turn it on, I'm like, man, they got good stories.
I'm with you on that. Songs are amazing.
Brandon, your label says your new CD and your tour is storytelling from the mountains, hence the title Blue Mountain. But give me a little background on your latest single, Jesus in Disguise, which, by the way, we are now playing and getting a lot of requests for it as well.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you guys for playing that song. It's an important song to me. I wrote it with these two guys, Lee Miller and Ross Copperman in Nashville, and I know that means absolutely nothing to your listeners, but they are both amazing songwriters, and they actually helped me develop a lot of the characters for this record. And when I say characters, everybody on this record, with the exception of one song, is fictional. I wanted to write around, setting was Blue Mountain, which is, in my mind, in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So bring the Appalachian feel to it and yet have a little bit of a hip-hop. So I call it hip-hop-Appalachia. Kind of got that sound to it. But Jesus in Disguise is about an old guy that lives up on the mountain, and a young man asks him, why should I believe in Jesus? I can't see him. I can't hear him. I can't touch him. Why should I believe in him? And the old man says, ever get something in your head, something you heard or something you read? It's basically saying you don't realize that Jesus is all around us. Those kind of feelings, those hints that you get to love or care for someone. And I think a lot about the verse that says, when I was naked, you clothed me. When I was hungry, you fed me. You never know how Jesus is going to come to you.
There are so many things that I struggle with, characteristics of Christ, that just don't come out of me the way that I hope that they would, especially things like patience. That's a huge one for me. So what about for you? What's an attribute of Christ that you think you struggle with?
Well, for me, I'm very patient. I'm perfectly patient. Okay, I'm being sarcastic.
I was just going to say, well, I need to take some lessons from you.
I know, exactly. Sometimes I can struggle a little bit with envy. I look at somebody else's situation and I really wish that I was there. It's hard being kind of seated in where I am, and gosh, I mean, my life is great, but it's funny how the grass is always greener, and I think that comes from a deeper need for God, that's just not been addressed for me. Mm-hmm. So, that's one thing. I think another thing would probably be passing judgment on people. I can be kind of quick to judge sometimes, and I certainly hope and wish that people wouldn't be that way with me. So, those are just two of the things on my
that you're willing to share. Well, you're not struggling with honesty, I'll tell you that. Thank you so much.
I don't. What did it say? I've always been good at telling the truth in one of my songs. Wait and see. I'm able to be open and honest.
Well, we surely appreciate that. All right, let me ask you about this, because this is something we talk about even here at the station, working in radio, Christian radio particularly, and being part of a ministry. I get it that sometimes there are moments in ministry where it takes on the role of a job, and there becomes this risk of losing touch with how you got into this ministry. And you hear well-known pastors talk about it a lot, that, you know, the busyness of the ministry can take you away from your first love. So how do you handle that?
That is a great question.
Why, thank you, Brandon. I worked on that one. I'm like, what do I really want to know from Brandon?
You know, it's funny. I think sometimes one of the most injured families, and I might get a little pushback on this from people, but I've just learned this from some of my friends that come from missionary families, like their families are either missionaries or they're in the ministry somehow. It's like anything else. It can start to kind of take precedence over what God's laid before you, not just your quote-unquote ministry, but your family is your ministry. Your wife is your ministry. And I think that certainly sitting before God and listening, He would tell you what your priorities are. So if you're kind of more caught up in your, and I'm putting this in quotations, ministry, then you're probably not spending a ton of time with God, and maybe even neglecting your family, because you're so busy. And listen, we can turn anything, even good things, into distractions of what God says are important. And first thing that's important is to love Him. And then next thing is to love others. And I would say on the top of my others list is going to be my wife and my kids. But hopefully, you know, I can love strangers that I've never met as well. But I think there's got to be a priority somewhere, you know?
Mandisa cleared up the rumor recently that the two of you, in fact, are not dating. Now, not that I care about this in the least. I really don't. But I feel like we're friends now. So for the listener, curious, are you dating anyone?
You know, I am. I don't normally talk about this, but I'll talk to you about it.
Okay.
Okay, the thing about Mandisa, we're great friends, but she got mad at me because I was joking about us dating.
She got mad at you? You can joke about us dating anytime you want, Brandon. I will not get mad.
Well, I think it was more like she was like, okay, don't joke about that, you know, and she's so right. Like, us guys, we probably don't know where to stop sometimes. But I love Mandisa, and I have a girlfriend, and we've been dating for about 5 months, and it's been amazing. But you know, it's one of those things that I'm just going to be real honest with you. One of the things that I think that you have to be careful about when you're a public person, talking about who you're dating, because when it doesn't work out, then everybody knows about it. You know, I think when you're married, you're growing something, and there's a commitment there. I think it's really important to talk about that.
Yeah, and I agree.
Yeah, you're in transition. It's like, it's not fair to everybody should know about that.
I'm very private when it comes to those things. I think it gets even worse for a girl. So you just go, we'll tread lightly on that one. And so you're dating, we'll leave it at that, and we'll say we wish you the best, and hopefully everything will work out. Everybody on the road has got their guilty pleasure, the one thing that you can't resist while you're traveling on the road. And for me, it's always been Starbucks and scones. It's like, okay, I can have a scone. We're traveling. I need to keep my energy up, but you do travel a lot as you are touring throughout the country. So for you, curious to know, what's your guilty pleasure?
Well, Starbucks is definitely on the list. As soon as I wake up every morning, I try to find a coffee shop. Starbucks is always very consistent. There's our little plug for Starbucks. But I like finding antique stores. I know that sounds funny, but when I'm traveling, and especially when I'm playing in a certain city, I like to go and find like an antique store, because it's full of like history, and there's always really peculiar things that you can find, and I just feel like I get a sense of where I am. Now, I rarely buy anything, but it's more or less a free museum.
Well, for me, antique stores, I love them, but I've realized, I can't afford anything in here. They charge a lot for them. So now I'm on to thrift stores. And when we were in Seattle, I was working with a bunch of guys, and I was the only girl. And let's go to a thrift store. And they're looking at me like, what? You don't want to go to the mall? I'm like, no, thrift store. But you can find great stuff in thrift stores as well.
Oh, man. I tell you, if you're ever in like a really kind of rural area and they've got a thrift store, you always find these really great, like, Western-y vintage shirts.
Right.
So that's where my best finds are in like little small towns, and they've always got really great like Western pearl snap shirts.
Yeah, you could wear one on like your next album cover. Like, see, you can shop for less.
Exactly. I'll have to keep that in mind.